You know, who says that live events aren't happening? Because, this is live, right? So thank you so much, Rich. I am particularly excited to be here, especially after hearing what you had to say about unleashing email's potential and really elevating it because friend, I am all about that. So let's talk about email newsletters in particular. Let's talk about how we can really unleash the potential of your email newsletter or the one that you produce for your organization. But before that, I want to tell you a story. So one day last June, I noticed this small wild rabbit in my backyard. Now, I've had wild rabbits in my yard before, but this was the first one that didn't seem completely terrified of me, that didn't run instantly. He was around so much and he was so conspicuous that I actually started to wonder, could I make friends with this rabbit? Could I actually start to form a kind of relationship with him? Now, I've been in marketing long enough to see this as a classic marketing challenge, right? This rabbit, I named him Bun, by the way. I thought of him as a kind of a marketing qualified lead. Why? Because he's already aware of me. He's already on my site. And so, site, get it? So my challenge was to move him down that funnel, right? To maybe think about getting into the consideration phase. And the conversion that I identified was that moment that I would get him to eat something from my hand, that I would be able to feed him directly. So I thought, I got this. He's already on my side. He's already aware of me. What's more is I love animals. Like my dog is my best friend in the entire world. So I thought, this is going to be a piece of cake. So I approached Bun and I walked up to him directly. And I said, hey, Bun, I almost look like one of those chat bots that pops up on a website. I'm like, hey, Bun, you've been here 47 times over the past few days. Could I get your email address in case we get disconnected? Bun, gone. That's okay. First touch, not always successful. I realized pretty quickly that I had to rethink my conversion campaign with this rabbit. I had to rethink how I would entice him to convert, right? So content, of course, was the solution. So I relaunched my campaign on June 17th. It was a Monday. It was 10:30 a.m. in the morning. I am only sharing this information with you because we are all email marketers here. I am showing you that everyone knows that a mid-morning outreach of earlier in the week is always the best time to get a response, right? We know that. So I relaunched my campaign 10:30 in the morning, June 17th. I sat in a chair on my patio and I held out a carrot to Bun, the food of his people. How did Bun react? Completely ignored me. That's okay. Relaunched again next day. Next day showed up June 18th, 10:30 again in the morning. Sit down on the patio. I reach out and hold some celery to Bun, still completely ignoring me, just 0% conversion. I started to notice that maybe I had to pay a little bit more attention to Bun. And I noticed that he would spend so many afternoons sitting in the center of this tall ornamental grass that's right off the patio. It's about as tall as I am, and it's about as 4 times as wide. And Bun would sort of hang out in there. So I thought, okay, carrots didn't entice him to me, celery didn't entice him to me. Maybe instead I need to bring that to Bun, to the place where he is. And so I spammed him straight up. I offered him carrots, I offered him broccoli, I offered him romaine lettuce, I offered him whatever I could. I just said, here, you choose. This was not the best way to approach. This terrified Bun. In fact, he scurried away. He did not show up again for like 4 days. He basically unsubscribed, you know? So what does my rabbit conversion story have to do with all of us here? Here's the thing, my friends, and here's how it relates to all of us in marketing today. This rabbit is hardwired to not trust me. He's hardwired to avoid me at all costs. And isn't that so often how we as consumers think about marketing that we see? Marketing that feels like marketing isn't the right approach so often with our customers. And we see this because we are all consumers as well. So the challenge is, how do I actually get him to trust me? How do I get to prove to him that I can add value to his life? How can I prove to him that I know what I have to offer will ultimately make his life so much better, which is the exact same challenge that so many of us have in marketing, right? We know that our products and solutions are fantastic. We get excited about them. We know they can improve the lives of our customers. But how do we actually translate that in a way that builds trust with the consumer? How do we get them to see what we see? The challenge for me was just this: how could I optimize Bun's buyer journey, right? How do I actually get him to see that value that I could offer him? I think that the best strategy with rabbits and with customers is always a story. But as Rich pointed out, this has been a very challenging year. There are so many different ways that we in marketing can tell our story, but in its basic format, its basic foundation, right? It's this. In marketing, there's a hero that we can relate to. It's not us, it's our customer. It's what they it's our customer is the hero of our story, right? It's what they need. There's a villainous challenge that they have, right? What is the problem that our products or solutions can help that hero with? And what is the epic struggle that we need to get through to resolution? So this is a basic foundation of a story. I think in these times, as Rich said, in these challenging times, I think that epic struggle is all the much more epic, right? Because the outcome is uncertain. We don't know how long we're going to be in the midst of this pandemic, and the stakes feel higher. We don't know where we're going to end up and what the world's going to look like after this. So I think as much as there are so many ways to tell a story, the foundation of that does not change, right? We still want to make our customer the hero. We still want to help them with their challenges. Our purpose doesn't change, why we do what we do, and of course, who we do it for, the hero, does not change. But one thing does change, and that's how we tell the story. Not the story we tell, but how we tell it. I think in marketing, we spend a lot of time trying to break through the clutter, right? We hear that a lot. We try to break through, but I don't think we want to think about how can I have your attention with our prospects and our customers. Instead, we need to think through everything that we do is how can I earn your trust? Is what I'm doing now ultimately going to build trust with our consumers? And why is this so important? It's because building trust, and what's more is creating affinity with our customers, with our prospects, is so key in marketing in 2020 in the world that we currently are doing business in. And why do I think this? It's because this is exactly what's in the brains of your customers or your prospects when they come to your website, when they go to your social channels, when they sign up for anything that you produce, an email newsletter or any of your marketing. Do they understand my problems best? Are they conveying trust? Will they be there for me long term? And what's more, do I like them? I think that affinity piece is so key in marketing, and it's vastly undervalued by so many companies. We don't think about the likability, but I think it's so key. And I think email newsletters, by the way, are a great way to show that. This pile of stuff is not an optimized marketing program, of course, right? We know this. We're all in email marketing, so we know that this is not an optimized marketing program. Now, you might be thinking, okay, condescending cat, what does this have to do with my own newsletter program? I think that your email newsletter is so critical to building trust and affinity, especially during a COVID age. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we actually think about this? And a lot of the ideas I'm going to share are inspired by my own efforts with my own email newsletter. Every other Sunday, every 2 Sundays, every fortnight, if you will. I publish an email newsletter directly from me, not from my company, which is Marketing Profs, but directly from me. Now, why do I do this? Because I really wanted to think about what really works with email newsletters today. So 2 years ago, I launched this newsletter, and over the past 2 years, it's grown tremendously. I haven't put a lot of effort into growing it, so this is flat out an experiment in what kind of content connects with a customer. I haven't done things like run ads or any of that stuff. I've just straight up been producing good content over the 2 years. And people reacted positively. Jason Skinner loves it, right? One of the few newsletters worth giving up your email address for. Andrew Davis talks about making an appointment to consume my newsletter. And even Gary Stockton put this on Instagram recently. He saves them all. Slightly stalkery. Am I right? That's okay. Love Gary. I'm not sharing with this all of this with you to flatter myself, but I'm sharing it with you to demonstrate that these are ideas and things that I've thought so much about over the past 2 years, and especially over the past 7 or 8 months of this pandemic, of this sort of strange new world in which we find ourselves doing business. So let's talk about what are those 7 lessons from the past 7 months in particular that I think we can all benefit from to improve our own email newsletters and really embrace that opportunity to level up our email programs, to elevate it and to unleash the power of it, as Rich talked about. Okay, so the first thing is that your email newsletter is so critical in a crisis. In 2020, at the start of the pandemic, in March and April, how many messages did we hear like this, right? We are here for you. This was the COVID script. But I think the smartest companies thought about doing things a little bit differently because they know, or they knew, that how we show up now as marketers, as businesses, as organizations is the thing that people will remember, not just now or 5 months from now, but I think has implications for years from now. How we show up now has implications for years. This is a study that Edelman did just a few months ago about how consumers are thinking about brand response during the pandemic. And guess what? Like, content is key to that. Content is the foundation of building that connection, and it's a way for us to communicate with compassion. And that's why I believe so so much in the power of the email newsletter. Can we just talk for a second about this poor gal? Just, I don't know. Every time I watch this, I hope that there was an air mattress or something. You know, this had to be staged, right? Can't be real. Anyway, your email newsletter, the content that you deliver through that, I do think is key to creating that connection and conveying that compassion to your prospects and to your customers. We all have some sort of email newsletter. For the most part, so many of us do. Marketing Profs and the Content Marketing Institute every year does some content marketing research in which we say, like, hey, marketers, do you have an email newsletter? How are we using it? And because I am very good at math, I will tell you that it's yes percent. Like, pretty much basically everyone has some sort of email newsletter. The question is, though, how many of us are actually using that email newsletter as effectively as we could, rather than just mailing and you know, this is actually ultimately my favorite ever GIF on the internet, or GIF, depending on what side of that conversation you're on. Such a good boy. I think in marketing, there's a tendency to think about our email newsletter as a distribution strategy, right? We think about the news piece of that. We want to talk about things that we want to tell our customers, right? We have things we want to convey. We think about it as a distribution strategy. We focus on the news part of newsletter. But I think a more powerful way to think about your email newsletter program is to focus on the second part of that word, which is the letter. Rich started out talking today about that opportunity to connect directly with one person at a time. And, it's a cliche in email, but it is so true, especially with an email newsletter. It's not a broadcast tool, it is a one to one, it's a letter. It's not a newsletter, right? It's a letter to one person. So when you think about that, I think it shifts the way that you communicate. And especially right now in the age that we find ourselves doing business, I think the best thing that we can do is to focus on nurturing those existing relationships, right? How do we actually not just say that we are there for you in these unprecedented times, but truly are we there for our customers and our prospects in these unprecedented times? Cleveland Clinic, I think, has done a tremendous job in terms of sharing how they are there for their patients and their community during the age of COVID. Few times a week, 3 times a week, Cleveland Clinic publishes Health Essentials, which is a newsletter about health and wellness. Fantastic resource. It's not about the hospital. It's not about any of their facilities worldwide or actually internationally. Instead, it's about how do we stay healthy and well. It's a wellness newsletter. But during these times, they realized that they had to go a little bit deeper and think more specifically, what does our community really need from us? What would they value? And so they started a second email newsletter, one that comes directly from Tomislav, who is their CEO and their president. He talks about things that are very specific to the community, right? If you have to go to a hospital, for example, for a procedure, what do you need to know before you go? How important is it to wear masks out in public? What if you have mask anxiety, and it turns out is actually a real thing? What if you have that? So Cleveland Clinic is getting into the minds of all of us and addressing some of these very real concerns. And I love that it comes directly from their CEO and president. It's so different. It doesn't come from Cleveland Clinic more broadly. It comes from Tomislav. And even the way it's written, you can tell that it's like he's very much aware of this one inbox to one person at a time. So he has lots of I's in there because he's speaking from him, but he has lots of we's too. It's a we that we're all in this together. And most importantly, he has lots of you's. He speaks directly to one person, not a community around their healthcare facilities, but he's speaking to you, one person. It changes the way this email newsletter reads, and it feels inherently more personal. It feels inherently more valuable. And I think it's just a fantastic look at what we all could do. Even if we are not in the healthcare business, we all have some kind of anxiety around how we are doing business today. And you're like, okay, but I market solutions, right? I'm not in the hospital business. I'm not in healthcare. The takeaway from this is not about the fact that Cleveland Clinic is in healthcare. Instead, it's how they communicate, how Tomislav is writing, how they are thinking about their email and newsletter program. They think about communicating peer to peer, one person from one person, as opposed to brand to target, right? So it's not so buttoned up. Instead, it's how can I help you? And I think that trust and affinity is grounded in that kind of mindset, right? It's what I call kind of pathological empathy for the audience. What do they really need from you? Not just who are they from a demographic standpoint, but really what do they need right now? How are they feeling about things? Taking the pulse of your potential audience and addressing it and writing specifically to them with that mindset, I think changes the game. Toast is a point of sale system based in Boston, Massachusetts. It's a business to business technology company. They have done such a great job, I think, of morphing their email newsletter. Now, who does Toast sell to? Toast sells to restaurants, another industry that was vastly affected in this age of COVID. But I love the way that Toast has really stepped up to the challenge that so many of their audience, so many of the restaurants in their audience feels. And I just want to share a quick example of that. So On the Line is their newsletter that comes out once a week. A few things I want to call out for around this is that it comes from Tyler. It comes from Tyler Kumela, who is an employee in marketing at Toast. It comes directly from him. And look at the way that this is written. Even actually the subject line too. I really love that. Dust yourself off. We've got an industry to rebuild. He published this one in May when restaurants were starting to open up again and offer some limited seating in some areas, but or 100% takeout depending on where the restaurants are located. But look at the way that this is written. He talks about how you'll have to navigate a new world where safety and distancing rule. And the whole newsletter is dedicated to what does it mean to reopen? How do we stay safe ourselves? And how do we make sure that our customers stay safe as well? This is pathological empathy, right? It's really getting an understanding of what is it like to run a restaurant during a pandemic? What is it like to actually succeed right now? All right, so the second thing that I think we can take away from the last 7 months are when you think about your email newsletter more broadly, I think about having a reason to publish a newsletter, but also a tell. So what do I mean by that? You know, in poker, a tell is the thing that gives that gives others a signal about what might be in your hand. And I think it's a really useful way to think about our marketing as well. Does it seem like it's conveying who we are? So I was driving down the road. I saw this sign by the side of the road, you know, the hut. Underneath it, it said, did you know? We did know. We know because pizza is in the name. This is an example of what I see time and again with from a marketing point of view. We talk about ourselves, right? We love to share what we have as opposed to how it'll help others. This is an example of corporate-centric messaging. So I think it's so key to think about what is it actually that your customers need or your prospects need. I think that too many of us start our email newsletter programs here, right? We need a newsletter for something because we've got to figure out a way to communicate regularly. But instead of we need a newsletter for, instead I think it's what does your audience need from you right now and what can only you provide? Workshape is a technology company that matches developers with available jobs. Hung Lee is the CEO and founder of Workshape technology platform. One of the things that I love about Hung Lee's marketing is his relentless love and pursuit of excellence in his email newsletter. His email newsletter is called Recruiting Brain Food. It is not called the Workspace.io update or anything like that. It's called Recruiting Brain Food. It comes directly from him, and you can see right there the tagline. It's Recruiting Brain Food for the week ahead. He's speaking to his audience or of people who will hire developers. So the reason he publishes this is because he is documenting on a weekly basis, he publishes this weekly, how the digital world is changing HR and changing recruiting. That's the world that Hung Lee lives in. But the thing that I really love about this, and this is the tell, is that he's very personal in his approach and how he writes this. Hung Lee is the CEO and founder of Workspace, but it comes directly from him. It's very personal in terms of the approach. He also gets a little political in how he's in what he's writing about and what he's discussing. And he's a little provocative, right? He's not afraid to sort of tick some people off sometimes. And why does he do that? Because he said that politics and world events cannot be separated from a topic like recruiting. And he wants to attract the like-minded to him and repel the timid, right? Not worry so much about people who are not going to be a good fit for his platform. So he isn't afraid to share his tell as well. The third thing I think we need to think about is a relatable narrator. In June of 2020, and a few months after the start of the pandemic, the New York Times changed up how they published their morning newsletter. And this is the interesting part. Instead of making it come from the New York Times and all of the staff at the New York Times, their morning update comes from this guy, David Leonhardt. And every single day, I get an email from David, directly from David into my inbox through the New York Times. It says, good morning, and it goes on from there to tell me the day's news. It's a fantastic way for the New York Times to think about humanizing their own brand, right? Their own email newsletter program. which is very different when you think about it because a newspaper is used to talking about its staff, right? The size and scope of its staff is it's unusual for a newspaper to think about having one person as the face of almost anything outside of the op-ed pages, right? And you're like, okay, 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 but they're the New York Times for Pete's sake, right? They are they are amazing at publishing. They've had so many years of email newsletters. They've got a staff that's and writers that are just like we would love as brands, as brand publishers. But here's the thing to think about. David is not just a writer, right? He's kind of an anchor host. And all throughout the email newsletter from the New York Times, from that morning edition, it is coming from David through his voice. He's very much married to the point of view of the New York Times, of course, but they anointed him as an anchor host as a way to humanize the news for the day and to sort of filter it in a human, accessible, relatable way because he's one person. He's not this edifice of a New York Times, of a newspaper. And I think we can do the exact same thing. CB Insights is a data technology company based in New York City. Anand Sanwal is the CEO, and he does that at the exact same thing. He is the anchor host of his own newsletter published by CB Insights. And some of you may know this because he is famous in email marketing circles, right? Every day I get an email from Anand Sanwal that says, "Hi there." And at the end of every newsletter, it says, "I love you." He loves me. Anand Sanwal loves me. I love that. I love that a lot. I think his approach, the fact that it is from Anand Sanwal, the fact that it is a personal, inherently relatable email is in partly why this has grown so tremendously over the past 10 years that CB Insights has been publishing this email newsletter. And as I mentioned, it comes directly from him, just like Tyler at Toast. It comes from Anand Sanwal. It doesn't come from newsletter at CB Insights or data at CB Insights, or the one I really hate, no reply at CB Insights. That guy gets way too much work in marketing, right? So have it come from a person, especially as an email newsletter, so key. I think that if your brand is to thrive in 2020 and beyond, we've got to show our faces. We've got to show our human side. So let's do that. The fourth thing is to think about a non-neutral voice, and the New York Times is a great example of that. Toast is a great example of that. CB Insights, non-neutral voice. And what does that mean? Have a point of view. Have an opinion in a way that will galvanize the people around you, that will attract people to you and to your brand. I think that key to this is losing that marketing voice. And we all have one. I have one. If I were to let you read the first drafts of any of my own email newsletters, I am very much like, I'm like a marketing robot. Like, this is how I sound. I'm like, "Dear subscriber." Like, no, I get it. We sit down to write an email newsletter or almost anything, and we get like sort of like petrified immediately. And I mean that like in a like petrified wood sense, not a emotional sense. So I think we need to lose that marketing voice. Warren Buffett, chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. I think of Warren all the time when I sit down to write almost anything. Warren Buffett writes an annual letter to shareholders that goes out to tens of thousands of people who are on Berkshire Hathaway shareholders. It also gets widely disseminated in the press. People love it. People dissect it. They want to know what Warren Buffett has to say about business in any given year when it's published in February. But when Warren Buffett sits down to write that letter to shareholders, do you know who Warren Buffett thinks about? He doesn't think about the tens of thousands of people who are part of Berkshire Hathaway. He doesn't think of employees. He doesn't think about shareholders. He doesn't think about any of that stuff. Instead, he thinks about this gal. He thinks about his sister, Doris. This is Warren Buffett's sister, Doris. And why does Warren think about Doris? Because he said she's smart and she reads a lot. She doesn't know all the financial jargon, but she doesn't want to be treated like a 5-year-old. He said, I try to say on paper what I'd tell her about the business if we sat down for an afternoon. I think that more broadly, writing to Doris for each one of us is an email superpower. It's a writing superpower, but especially an email because of that one to one, like Rich said, right? Embracing that opportunity that we have. I think of it as an email superpower. And I think when you think about write to Doris, it changes the way you communicate. Think about the U test, right? You get out of this sort of dear valued customer, and like the Cleveland Clinic, you count the number of U's in your email newsletter. If you run out of fingers, you're doing great, right? If you run out of fingers, you're doing great. Use you as much as you possibly can, because remember, it's one to one. One of my pet peeves is when email newsletters start out in with a plural. They'll say like dear friends. It's one person. I don't share my email address with all my friends. No, one person. So it's friend, not friends. I think write to Doris also reminds you to add context. So this isn't a thing that we're blasting this segment about. Instead, it's a useful thing that I want to tell you about that could only come from me. A thing that could only come from me changes the way that you communicate. I think that if we can think about writing to Doris, I also think that we can ultimately free us up to be more specific in how we're writing. And when we are more specific in our communication, that's a hard word to say, specificity. When we have more specificity, we are ultimately more relatable. Velocity UK is an agency based just outside of London, and I love their email newsletter so much. And I want to share just a few things about it that I totally love. They're a bunch of creative souls at Velocity UK. And this was from one of their recent issues of their newsletter. You probably picture Velocity as the creative snowflake end of the marketing spectrum, but behind the interpretive dance and pan pipe jingles, don't ask, got rejected. We lean into the analytics dashboards like tweens lean into TikTok. That's like such a beautifully specific and relatable and fun way of saying we might be creative, but we dig data. That's basically what it's saying. But instead you're getting the voice of Velocity. And why is that important? Because it tells you what Velocity is like to deal with. It tells you what they are like as an agency to deal with. And you may not like that. You may be allergic to that. You may think, I hate that so much. That's okay. You're not going to be a great fit for them as a client. And that's exactly why they lean into voice so much in their own email newsletter. Oh, and by the way, I just sort of love this too. This later on in the same email, our Uber geek Duarte, he's an employee at Velocity, makes Nate Silver look like a finger in the air hunch monkey. I don't even know what a finger in the air hunch monkey is, but I don't know. I kind of love that. So yeah, hunch monkey, who knew? If the from line were to fall off your email newsletter, would you know it's yours? Or do you sound like maybe any other insert category here for your brand out there, right? Do you sound like a competitor potentially, or is it clear that it's coming directly from you, even if your from line was masked? All right, my fifth point here is about setting expectations with your clients, with your customers, with those on your email list, but also signaling belonging with them. You know, the great Greek philosopher Pinterest, you might know his work, said that you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I think that is so true. Yet just 57.7% of brands actually send welcome emails. They actually take that opportunity to make a great first impression. Yet look at these stats. Look at how much more incredibly they perform. I found this with my own email newsletter, which is why I've sort of honed over the past 2 years a very intentional way of engaging prospects through that email welcome mat, so to speak. 67% of those on my list who have subscribed to my newsletter will open that welcome email. 43% of subscribers will click through one of the links on that welcome email. And then I invite my subscribers to reply. 31% of that 67 hit reply and say what they want to tell me. So just to walk you through it a little bit and why I do what I do right here, we're looking at tone right away. Whoops, missed that a little bit. There we go. Sorry. Um, right here, right away, setting up tone. I'm establishing tone immediately. Welcome. I have a question for you. I'm using an emoji signaling that this is sort of a different kind of marketing newsletter. It's much lighter. It's much more fun, I guess, than most. Also, I mentioned this already, but it's hi friend, not friends. I don't collect first names because I don't know. It's an experiment on my part. So I say, hey, friend. I then set expectations. I tell them exactly what they're going to get every other Sunday, exactly what that's going to be like. I throw in the high-spirited shenanigans, and then I invite them through an easy ask. This is the key. This is the most important part. Tell me about you, I basically say. Why are you here and how can I help you? This is so useful for me just in terms of helping me figure out who are these people who are on my list? How can I help them the most? Now, there's many different ways of thinking about welcoming somebody to your email list. There's less high touch ways than I do it, certainly. Jane Freeman, I think, does a great job. When you sign up for her list, she'll send you a series of 3 emails that'll arrive in your inbox. But what I like about it is that she tells you exactly what's going to happen and when you can expect to get them. Or in terms of like the very other end of the spectrum, my friend Joe Waters does this through his Selfish Giving newsletter. He talks about corporate social responsibility, and right there he says you'll get more out of this if you just read the housekeeping notes first. It's a super low touch way to do it, right? Low tech, but effective. At least he's letting people know, hey, happy you're here. Here's how you can get the most out of your experience today. All right, my 6th point here today is don't let your newsletter sport a Zoom mullet, okay? Don't let it happen. What's a Zoom mullet? In 2020, the Zoom mullet it's just sort of a work from home reality, right? We all look fantastic from here up when we have to do a video, something, or mediocre in my case, but we all look okay from here up. But down below, there's like, that could be anything going on, right? It's kind of a hot mess down there a lot of times. That's how it is. I think if we think about don't letting our businesses have a Zoom mullet as well, especially through our email program, what does that mean? It means that how you show up in email is exactly how you show up on social. It's how you look on your website. There is a continuum all along. It doesn't look real ugly down below. Know what I mean? When you get to the home page of Currituck County Economic Development Agency, you'll see 2 calls to action. 2 calls to action. One says find property. If you want to do business in Currituck County, you can look for property there. The other one says call Larry. I saw this and I thought, what is that? So I clicked it and I called Larry, and it turns out Larry is a real guy. It's Larry Lombardi. He is the executive director of the Currituck County Economic Development Agency in North Carolina. And everything the Currituck County Economic Development Agency does is consistent across all of their channels. There is no Zoom mullet going on in Currituck County, at least at the Economic Development Agency. And by the way, I love the fact that it's an economic development agency and not something like a cool agency, like a cool marketing agency or maybe like a consumer brand. It's an economic development agency. Like, you never see this kind of like quirkiness in a government agency, but I love that it is exactly what is going on here. So Larry Lombardi is the face of Currituck County Economic Development Agency. He has a new YouTube series in which he's answering questions about what it's like to live and work in Currituck County. And even the newsletter comes from him. And look at the way that this is written. Right off the bat, talk about like repelling people who are not a good fit. You might not like my newsletter, it says, and that's okay. His emails are truly a little bit different, right? They're very different, but that's intentional because everything throughout the Currituck County website is very different. It's quirky, it's interesting, it's a place that makes you go, huh, just like Currituck County itself, as a matter of fact, just like the place. And across everything that they do. So we all have forms like this on our website, just constantly, just a reminder of the people behind Currituck County, and especially Larry, who is the face of the agency, has the biggest personality. Remember that no marketing thrives in solitary confinement, right? No marketing ever does well when it's all by itself hanging out there. And especially in email, you want to create a bridge to other properties, other channels. It's not a tower. Daily Skim does a fantastic job with this, just very simply. At the very bottom of its newsletter, you can click on that link that says reach out here for a chance to be featured, and you can share what's going on in your life, right? It's a massive list, but a simple way to build that bridge in. The Daily Carnage is a email newsletter that's published every single workday by Carney and Company. They're a small agency in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And their Facebook group is also called the Daily Carnage. So it's their Facebook group is tied into their email newsletter. Their Facebook group is not named Carney, right? It's named the Daily Carnage, which is the name of their email newsletter. And then they create this wonderful ecosystem because in the newsletter, they feature questions that were asked in the Facebook group. It's a great example of no Zoom mullet. It's also a great example of letting no marketing thrive in solitary confinement whatsoever. One that I saw just this morning that I wanted to share with you. My friends at Atomic is a content marketing agency targeted towards small business. I'm sorry, not agency, content marketing coaching, sales and marketing group based in Newcastle in the UK. They just launched a brand new newsletter this morning that they're calling the Revolution. Here's one of the ways that they are already building in that interaction. These are my friends, Andrew and Pete. That's Andrew there on the left and Pete on the right. Look at what they wrote in the very first issue, Prizes and Shenanigans. They're introducing their new newsletter. The 7th person to reply to this email gets free pizza delivery. Seriously, don't wait, reply now. They're just gonna send pizza randomly to the 7th person who responds. Like, I just love the way that they really thought through how do we bring our personality out. So of course I replied to it. I didn't win, as it happens, because they're in the UK and I was already 5 hours behind everybody else by the time that I got it early this morning. But I ended up exchanging some email with them a little bit, and they said that, yeah, legit, they have a solution that will allow them to send pizza to almost anywhere in the world. So great. All right, final point here today before hopefully we have time to get to some questions is creating Netflix-like momentum within your email newsletter. How do you actually get people to binge that story that you're telling? How do you actually get them to binge your email newsletter? And Patronizing Cat is going to make one final appearance because they're like, we're a newsletter. We're not Dead to Me, right? We're not like the most amazing Netflix show ever, which was Dead to Me. If you haven't seen it, I highly, highly recommend it. I think there's a couple of different ways that we can think about building momentum within our own email newsletters, getting readers to keep reading just like we keep watching Netflix. The first is to think about being very story driven in how you are writing your email newsletters. And for this, I wanted to share just an example of something that I put out late last year. I told a story about being stuck in the Sao Paulo airport, or my fear of being stuck in Sao Paulo, and how when I got to the Sao Sao Paulo airport, there we go, to make a super tight connection about how this woman, this employee of Azul Airlines, basically treated me like that soccer ball and just kind of like drove me like straight down the the airport and managed to get me onto the plane into the goal, with seconds to spare. And I implored anyone on my list to please help me find this woman. She was a random employee of Azul Airlines, and I just could not get in touch with her, but I wanted to thank her. And so a few months after this, I published this in November. A few months after this, Regan, one of the people on my list, reached out and says, "Hey, like I was on maternity leave for 3 months and I bookmarked all of these, my newsletters, to read when I got back. So I know it's probably confusing that I'm reaching out about this newsletter, seeing it was written 2 months ago." But she's like, "What happened? Did you find her?" I mean, that blew me away because that's an example of the power of storytelling in an email newsletter. It feels like we had a conversation going on and she wanted to know the rest of the story. The second way I think to create momentum is open loops within your emails. So Morning Brew, I think, does a fantastic job with this. At the very beginning, they mentioned that today is the 40th anniversary of Rubik's Cube back in January. Can you name all 6 colors? That's at the very top. That's a fantastic open loop because I have questions. Immediately, I start thinking, well, I know red and blue is black. No, I know it's green, yellow. Immediately you start thinking about it and you want to know. Your brain needs that closure. Momentum is so much more powerful than moments, and I think all of us in email marketing know this. It's about creating momentum not only with our programs but with each individual newsletter as well. The other way that we can think about momentum is just to create pattern breaks, right? Your brain gets really fatigued when you look at that block of text. So Retail Brew, sister publication to Morning Brew, I think does a fantastic job with this. Look at that white space. That white space is oxygen, right? There's very few paragraphs that have more than 2 or 3 if they're very short, um, sentences. So think about how you are writing. Why do they do this? Because every Retail Brew newsletter is long, but yet 2,000 words doesn't feel like 2,000 words when it has that kind of oxygen built into it, embedded right in it. They also create momentum with some super sharp headlines, compelling images along the way, and very, very clear copy hierarchy, right? Clear structure to every one. It never feels like a hot mess, like you're not sure where to go. Immediately just creating momentum for you all the way through, and also creating that scroll magnet toward the end, just like with Rubik's Cube. How Morning Brew did that with Rubik's Cube. Crafty Brew does it as well in a different way. At the very bottom of their weekly email newsletter, they have this thing, the rumor mill, which is sort of a gossipy kind of thing at the end. You gotta, if you're in the biz, you gotta check that out. All right, wrapping it up here. I won't read these for you, but this is a good one to screenshot if you would like to take a screenshot. These are all the things that we talked about today. Just have fun with your email newsletter. It's such a powerful way to build an audience because when you tell the truth and you tell it over time, that's what's going to build that trust and affinity with you, with your customers, and with your prospects. So hopefully you might be wondering, hold up, what happened with our friend? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. I had to think through this for myself. Am I actually building trust with Bun? Am I consistently showing him that I understand him best? Am I thinking about things from his point of view and not my own point of view? And what's more, does Bun like me? Am I really showing him who I am? I realized actually that I didn't know anything about rabbits. I thought I did because I love dogs, but I had to do my own research. It turns out that Bun is an Eastern cottontail. I did so much research on Bun. I found out that he doesn't actually like carrots all that much. I found out instead that his love language is greens, that it's grasses, tall grasses in particular. I did so much research on him that you might say I went down a Rabbit hole. Yeah, rabbit hole. Eventually I realized that I needed to really entice him with greens, right? So what you're looking at there is some grasses that I picked around my neighborhood. And yes, I was that strange neighbor walking down the street with arms full of grass that I plucked out of my neighbor's yard. You're also looking at a pile of arugula that I got from Whole Foods because it's organic and nothing but the best for my boy, you know. All throughout July and August, I worked on building that trust with Bun. Look at him there. He's eating that arugula. He's eating the grass. I'm starting to introduce the romaine. It turns out he really loves romaine. Worked on this over time. Now he is well into the consideration phase. He does not run when he sees me anymore. He is definitely thinking about things a little differently because I have started to give him the kind of content that he actually does want, that he values. And so here's what ended up happening. And I don't have audio with you right now, unfortunately. So you're just going to have to imagine that when you see this next short video, that you hear a swell of music and that it is just a profound moment. All right. So I just need you to imagine that in your head because this is what happened 3 months in to our relationship. Here he goes. And yeah, yes, this happened. Can you hear the swell of that music? While Bun is just like all in. Yeah, look at what a big boy he is now too. It's all that organic arugula. Yes, other side. All right, my friends. If you liked what I had to share today, if you want to check out my newsletter, there's the URL for it. These are very challenging times, and I just want to end with a completely serious note. I hope you're okay. We're all doing our absolute best right now, and just give yourself a break, give yourself some credit. I think you're doing great. I think marketing is up for the challenge, and you are in the right space right now. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Anne. This was fantastic. And we've received a flood of questions. We're not even going to be able to get through all of them, but I'll ask a couple of them. So one is, Anne, what do you think Bun the bunny needs to engage? Perhaps a slow drip campaign?
Yeah, I'm guessing that question was asked before the big reveal at the end, but
That's right.
yeah, basically it was a very slow campaign. I mean, here's the thing. At the very beginning of my relationship with him, I acted like it was an arms race in a way, where I was like so focused on just making it happen, just waiting for the conversion, just every single day sitting out there, instead of actually thinking about it with a slower approach. Because I think email, when it's done right, email marketing and email newsletters in particular, it is a slower approach. You can't build trust in a day. It's about showing up consistently over time, and that's really what I needed to do for Bun. I also needed to, as I mentioned at the very end there, I had to figure out what the heck was he going to value, because what I thought he valued was very different than what he actually valued. And so really doing that research so that I could approach things from his point of view, having that kind of pathological empathy for him, is ultimately, I think, what made that conversion a success.
I love that. So analogous to marketing.
It's so true, right?
Good marketing anyway. Another question was, are there any things you tried, tested in your newsletter that didn't work so well? And did you, any split tests or anything like that that you want to talk about?
Yes, at the very beginning, I devised my newsletter program with especially to talk about writing, because writing is my thing, and I wanted to talk about how writing and marketing and content can kind of play together. But I also love the idea of nurturing prospects over time. So sort of like we were just talking about, taking a slower approach to your marketing programs and not just going for the quick hit, but actually thinking about nurturing and developing that relationship with my prospects. And so at the beginning, I was hyper focused on making sure that I covered all of those topics. I had something about writing and something about marketing more broadly, and maybe something about specific to content, and maybe I would have something that was about slow. And I felt like in a way, I tried too hard, to get all those factors in there. And the email newsletter ended up being, it wasn't just long, but it was too much. So I think in some ways what I needed to figure out was that, yes, my email newsletter still is pretty long for an email newsletter. It's about 1100 words ish, on average, but I like less is often more, right? I had to sort of figure out that balance between not making every week comprehensive, but actually thinking about being comprehensive over time. So does
Yeah.
that make sense? Am I
Yeah,
making it clear? So yeah,
absolutely.
so that was the first thing. The second thing is that I tested emojis and subject lines, because that's like such a hot issue for
Yes.
so many marketers. It's like, do emojis work? I just saw this research that said that they didn't. I saw this research that said that they did. And what I found was that emojis actually worked for me, because it wasn't significantly higher in terms of the open rate and the click through, but it was higher enough that I felt justified. And also, I like emojis, and so that was the other piece. I do this email newsletter for fun. It's straight up fun. So it's easier for me just to sort of play around and just do things for fun because I like it. I'm not saying that that's what marketers should do, but ultimately, that's if you're marketing on behalf of a brand, you should always think about what your customers want. But ultimately, I just decided, I like it, so that's what we're
Yeah.
doing.
But isn't that part of being authentic in marketing is sometimes just taking risks like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And deciding that it's worth it. Like, emojis and subject lines I don't think are such a big issue, but but I mean, just in the grand scheme of things, I mean, I think there's so many more things that I would focus on, but yeah, if it's if but yeah, absolutely taking risks and doing things that really matter to you and your brand the most. Some of the
Yeah.
examples I showed today, like Hung Lee from Recruiting Brain Food, that's basically what they do for their marketing. That's how much they believe in the power of that email newsletter and in owning that relationship, like Rich talked about. They're not fighting with an algorithm to show up on somebody's Facebook page, right? Instead,
Yeah.
they're understanding the power of that. And so, I think because if you're understanding that, and if you're building that kind of trust, the audience will almost forgive you for just taking some risks, even if they don't work out, even if you
Yeah.
ultimately abandon them.
I agree. I agree. Well, Anne, thank you so much. This was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me.